The global chessboard is shifting and fast. Trade wars are colliding with military escalations, old alliances are being redrawn, and economic fault lines are opening from Europe to Asia. In this edition of the Watchtower Report, we explore a week that saw both chaos and recalibration. From warship failures in North Korea to silent economic pressures in Southeast Asia, the signals of a changing world are growing louder. Global trade and alliances in flux. The US-China trade war is no longer just a bilateral feud. It's become a gravitational force, pulling entire regions into its field of influence. Southeast Asia, once a relatively neutral zone of commerce, is now a contested arena. Malaysia and Singapore, two of the region's most strategically positioned economies, are publicly expressing anxiety about their narrowing diplomatic space. These nations are deeply tied to both American tech and Chinese manufacturing. As US sanctions harden and Chinese influence grows through the Belt and Road Initiative, neutrality is becoming nearly impossible. Singapore's foreign ministry released a rare statement calling for multipolar respect for economic sovereignty, a veiled plea to avoid becoming collateral in a larger economic war. Malaysia's central bank hinted at diversifying currency reserves and increasing trade in non-dollar denominated contracts. Meanwhile, a seemingly separate development is happening thousands of kilometers away. The European Union and Australia have resumed long-stalled trade negotiations, but this time, there's more than agriculture on the table. The new discussions include clauses for defense cooperation, naval interoperability, and cybersecurity protocols. This isn't just about lamb exports or cheese labeling. This is about reconfiguring the global economic architecture. Trade is becoming indistinguishable from security policy. Russia-Ukraine prisoner swap. For the first time in nearly 3 years, a diplomatic breath. Ukraine and Russia exchanged approximately 1,000 prisoners each. The exchange took place under tight security, with intermediaries from Turkey and the Red Cross reportedly involved. While the Kremlin called it a gesture of goodwill, Ukrainian officials emphasized the return of wounded and captured soldiers as a humanitarian necessity, not a sign of rapprochement. Nonetheless, this marks the largest such exchange since early 2023 and could signal a softening of positions, or at the very least, a back channel that remains open. However, analysts caution that this is not peace, it's positioning, a gesture that could buy time for regrouping, rearming, or redrawing diplomatic red lines. North Korea's warship launch failure. May 21st was meant to be a day of triumph for Pyongyang. A second Chuae-Hyun-class destroyer was scheduled to launch in front of military elites and Supreme Leader Kim Jong Un. Instead, it turned into a national embarrassment. The 5,000-ton warship capsized during a side-launch maneuver, with its stern prematurely entering the water while the bow remained wedged on the slipway. The result? A twisted hull, damaged systems, and a soaked political ego. Satellite imagery released by independent analysts showed the warship lying at an awkward angle, partially submerged, with tarps hastily thrown over exposed compartments. North Korean state media remained silent for 48 hours before finally acknowledging the failure and blaming it on anti-revolutionary sabotage. Kim Jong Un reportedly ordered the arrest of several engineers and shipyard officials. One source claimed the Workers' Party had convened an emergency tribunal to assess who would be scapegoated. This incident is more than a technical mishap. It's a metaphor. North Korea's military ambitions are running into the limits of engineering, isolation, and internal decay. US policy shifts and global repercussions. President Trump's policy moves this week weren't just bold, they were seismic. On Monday, he announced a sweeping 50% tariff on all European Union imports, effective June 1st. The announcement sent global markets reeling, with the euro tumbling to a 12-month low against the dollar. Even more controversially, the administration threatened a 25% tariff on all smartphones not manufactured in the United States. That includes iPhones assembled in Asia. Apple's stock dropped 4% within hours. But the financial markets aren't the only ones watching. Europe's political leadership sees these moves as economic blackmail, designed to force reshoring and industrial decoupling. Meanwhile, allies in Asia are quietly reconsidering their exposure to American tech reliance. And then came the purge. Over 100 staff were abruptly terminated from the National Security Council. The justification? Streamlining strategic operations. Critics called it ideological cleansing. Adding to the storm, the new Pentagon spokesperson, Kingsley Wilson, has been embroiled in scandal for past comments linking global events to anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. The appointment sparked backlash from Jewish advocacy groups and foreign diplomats alike. All of it paints a picture. A White House doubling down on economic nationalism and ideological loyalty. For allies, the question isn't what Trump will do next. It's how much of the global order will survive him. Europe's strategic realignments. Europe is not waiting to be left behind. The UK and EU signed a landmark agreement this week to reset post-Brexit relations. Under the New Deal, EU fishing boats gain access to British waters for an additional 12 years. In exchange, the UK secured an open-ended veterinary agreement, easing export restrictions on agricultural goods. But beneath the surface, a more significant realignment is taking place. The formation of Weimar Plus, an expanded diplomatic alliance that now includes the UK and Italy alongside the original Weimar Triangle of Germany, France, and Poland, is a sign of Europe circling its wagons. This new bloc aims to act faster on foreign policy and defense issues, particularly as US unpredictability grows. There's talk of developing joint expeditionary forces and pan-European cybersecurity standards. Meanwhile, Germany made headlines of its own by deploying the 45th Tank Brigade to Lithuania. This is Germany's first permanent military deployment abroad since World War II, an unmistakable message to Moscow, and France is taking its fight with Iran to the legal battlefield. On May 16th, Paris filed a case at the International Court of Justice, accusing Tehran of violating the rights of two French nationals imprisoned since 2022. Diplomacy is no longer confined to embassies. It's being litigated in The Hague. Flashpoints in the Middle East and Africa in Yemen. Tensions are on the rise again. After a missile attack on Ben Gurion Airport, Israel responded with targeted airstrikes against Houthi infrastructure. While the U.S. remains in a ceasefire with the Houthis, Israel's actions complicate that fragile peace. In Mali, public frustration with the military junta erupted into mass protests. The regime had dissolved all political parties earlier this month, sparking outrage from civil society groups and international observers. The protests have spread beyond the capital, signaling deep unrest. Market jitters over Taiwan investors are growing uneasy over Taiwan. With military maneuvers near the Taiwan Strait and hostile rhetoric from Beijing, the risk of conflict is being priced into global portfolios. Several major investment firms have begun reducing exposure to Chinese equities, increasing hedges against semiconductor supply shocks, and even modeling worst-case scenarios involving a blockade or limited conflict. This isn't theoretical anymore. Taiwan is the front line of the global tech economy. Any disruption could ripple into everything from AI chips to electric vehicles. Trade deals are now defense pacts. Warships are propaganda tools. Courtrooms are battlefields. And economies are hostages to power. The world isn't just shifting, it's reshaping. The old order is unraveling. The new one is still forming. The only constant now is movement. This has been the Watchtower Report. Subscribe for weekly insight where strategy meets reality.